In the last video, we got it set up so that our game can detect when it's time for an interaction to occur. We just set up a quick test one, so now it's time to start putting that together. So the plan here for this tutorial is just have a speech bubble pop up and a little conversation. In particular, that speech, we'll put that together here in a moment. I copied some questions from a quiz in a class I taught recently, and we'll just have that appear in a speech bubble and an input box to type into them. So we need a bit of a user interface going. And to make a user interface in Unity, what we do is we come over to the hierarchy panel here, and if we right click, we'll get this menu with a bunch of things to create. One of those being UI elements. And it takes several parts. A canvas is the element that everything loads into. And then we need an event system to detect what happens. And inside of that canvas, we'll put a bunch of panels. And then on the panels is where we put the images and the text and all of that. So if we just go ahead and select panel, it will include a canvas and an event system. And Unity shows these really big over here. So with it highlighted here, if I bring my cursor over here and push F to focus on it, it shows how it'll appear on the screen. Right now it takes up the whole thing, kind of big. But it's also hard to tell because it doesn't really look like a speech bubble. So the first thing we can put in here is that background image. And that way we can see what we're going to be working with. So if we come over here with the panel selected, and might as well give it a meaningful name. I'll rename that and call that speech bubble. That way we can tell at a glance which one that is. We don't have to click on things to figure out what's what. You always want to give things meaningful names. But in the inspector about that, there's a few components here already. The size of it, some other stuff, but this is the one that I'm worried about here. The image that it shows. And right now it's just a plain gray background. But in this assets folder that was downloaded, if I expand that out, way down here somewhere there's a folder for UI stuff. And in here, one of the options is a speech bubble. So I'm just going to grab that and drag it over here and replace that generic background image with a speech bubble. So that's what it'll look like. And the outline we're seeing here is the entire screen. So we don't want to take up the entire screen with it. So if we grab the little blue dots, we can kind of resize it to take up a portion, just a portion of the screen, and then click in the middle. Oh, not on the blue circle in the middle, but somewhere inside of it and drag it around until we find a good spot for it. So that'll give us the speech bubble. And along with that, we want to put some text on it. So it's best to do things in layers. It seems like a little bit extra setting it up, but when we do it in layers, it's easier to adjust things because then we can go just right to that layer, adjust the one thing we need that needs fixed, and not affect anything else. So that's kind of where the speech bubble will kind of put a speech bubble in there. And here in a moment, we'll run the game and make sure it all looks good, and then make any adjustments afterwards. So here on the speech bubble, if we right click on it and now go down to UI and select text, you'll notice it's indented to indicate that that text is inside of that speech bubble. So we zoom in here a little and kind of drag that around, find a good spot for it, for the text to start. And then over here in the inspector with that selected, one of the components is text. So we can take this out and put in some test text. Some test text goes here just to see what it'll look like. Make sure everything's readable when the game plays and all that. Might as well expand this out so that it takes up most of the speech bubble there. That way we have room for plenty of words. And along with that, so like one character will ask a question and the other character has to answer the question. So we'll need an input box. So again, select speech bubble and right click on that. And from UI, we want an input field. And I'm just using the regular input field, not the text mesh. So input field, and kind of sits on there. We might not want that sitting right on top of our text, so I'm just going to grab it and drag it down to the bottom of the screen. So a question will appear up here, and the answer gets typed in here. Let's run this and see what it looks like. See how those appear, because we have the outline of the screen, and our character's walking around somewhere, so how do these look next to them? And we can see with the game running here, that might not be the best place for the speech bubble. It's kind of right on top of our character. That input box doesn't seem bad, but maybe move that up just a little bit and move the input box a little closer to the center. So that way the input box looks like it belongs with our character, and the speech bubble will just appear above it. It wouldn't hurt to set up at least some flip animations so that it would change depending on which way we approach the character from. But it'll be fine for this quick example. Have some text up here asking a question, and then the player will type in the answer down here. So we can come back out here and make just a couple adjustments. I'm going to select the panel and make that a little wider and a little narrower. That way our speech can go up there. Then I'll move the text down something like that, where it all will mostly fit inside the bubble. And then move this a little closer to the middle so that it's right next to our player. That'll work for here. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. So if we run that again to test it, better. It doesn't block our character and kind of follows him around. But we might want to go ahead and set that up so that it turns on and off with our character. So let's do that now, which will be when we have a collision. When we have a collision, we can just toggle that on and off. Is probably the easiest way to do it. So let's set that up. At this point, we know our collision works. So instead of destroying the other game, we'll just toggle the speech bubble and answer field on and off. So what we'll need is a reference to them, which in particular, both the text and the input field are sitting inside of the background. So we can just turn that background on and off. So let's set up a reference to that. Over in variables, we'll create a new variable. Oh, whoops, have to put a name first. So we'll enter a name, I'll just call this conversation. Making up some sort of name that's at least meaningful enough we can tell what it is. And the type, well, that's going to be a game object because we want to refer to this speech bubble right here. So I'm going to grab that speech bubble and drag it down and drop it right in that spot. So now that we have a reference to it, we can just click here and drag over, and that'll get us a reference in this script where the collision is detected. And if we make this big, so we want to make some changes here. Instead of destroying that other component, what we want to do is set the active state. So I'm going to right click on that and go to replace and look for game object. Oops, I'll move my cursor so that those words aren't there. Set active. And once it finds it, so set active that's whether it shows or not. So let's turn this off because it's not the other character we want to set active or not. We want to set our reference to the conversation active. So to do that, well, if it's off, we'll turn it on. And if it's on, we'll turn it off. So really, we just want to switch whatever value it is. So if we drag out from the value node here on the set active, one of our options, it's expecting a Boolean, so we can just pass in our regular logical not, the negate operation. If it's true, we're going to make it false. If it's false, we're going to make it true. But we need to find out what it is. So from our conversation, reference to the conversation, the speech bubble itself, we want to get active self. So if we look for get active self, this will tell us whether that speech bubble is currently showing or not. And if it's showing, we'll turn it off. And if it's not showing, we'll turn it on. And as we look through here, enters this flow. And right now it's referring to itself, but this script's on the player. So we need to switch that and refer to that conversation because that's the one we want to turn on and off. So when a collision is detected, we're going to look at whether that conversation is on or off, switch the state of it, and then reset that. So if it's off, we'll turn it on. If it's on, we'll turn it off. Just toggling it on and off. So if we run that to see if it works. So now with our game running, we can move around and it's still showing, but we see there when we bump into another character, whoops, it comes on and off. And something funny is going on with the movement. I need to check and see what's going on with that. But the toggling on and off works, but we probably want it started off. So let's make that adjustment. And after making that adjustment, something funny is going on with the movement. When I push over, it goes way too far. So I might need to make some adjustments on that. But let's look at the speech bubble for now. Remember, always fix one problem at a time. So if we stop this, then to toggle that, we might need a new script to control this. Something that controls this thing itself. So if we come back to our macros folder, right click, create a new bolt flow macro, and we'll call this conversation control. And now we want to attach that to our speech bubble. Things we've seen before, so we'll add a component, we'll add a flow machine, then drag the conversation in there to link those together. And we just want this to start in the off state. So to start it in the off state, well, we can do that just for the initialization of the game. So we'll search for the start unit. Remember, the start runs once, and then the update event runs every frame of the game. It's taking a long time to search here. There it is. So we'll bring that in, and whenever we start, well, we'll call that method we just did. We want to set active. We want to set the active state of a game object. And game object set active. And to start, we want to set it to false. So if we just drag out from our Boolean control here, notice the purple relates to a Boolean control, and we'll just set it to false. And to set, remember, a Boolean value is true or false. So if we check the box, it's true. Uncheck the box, it's false. And this is going to apply to itself, and we linked it to the speech bubble, so it should apply to the right thing, and start it off in a false state. So let's check that now. Make sure it starts turned off, and then comes on when we interact with another character. So run the game. And it started with the speech bubble not there, not active. But if we come over here and interact with another character, our speech bubble appears and disappears. So it starts off and toggles on and off. So that's what we were looking for there. And in the next video, we will adjust the text that shows.